Yes. They are opposing. Oh yeah. I think I put more work into that one. Let me just do the guy in there. We'll look at that. Yeah. This is the ultimate rendering tutorial for like stuff on people, pretty much. Nice. Okay, for the people that just joined, we're on Blender today for the first like maybe half hour, 45 minutes of class, and then we'll be answering questions about your projects. Hopefully we can make a lot of headway today, but there's 2 links in the Discord under general for the Blender files. So download either one. The first one is a lot smaller file, so maybe go with that one first. But if you can't find it, let me know. We're gonna get started with Blender here. So if you open it up, for everyone that I haven't talked to already, that's probably on Zoom, if there's other windows in your way, when you first pull it up, I think there's like a big gray window in the way. You can just X out of those until you get to the screen where you can kind of see all the buttons and stuff, because this is the screen we'll be working with today. So let me just close these. Okay, so yeah, when you first open it up, hopefully we're all at kind of this sort of screen where there's a couple planes and probably a human figure somewhere as well. We've gone through Blender right before spring break, so hopefully everyone knows how to like move around in Blender. But basically the middle mouse button is to orbit, and if you hold shift while doing that, we can pan around. Just basic things, but hopefully you remember that. Other than that, we should be in a 3D view right here where we can actually look around. The way to switch into that is up in the top left. There's all these different views you can go into for different things. If you're constructing materials, you could be in the shader editor. If you're working on the final image, you could be in the compositor. But for pretty much all of today, we'll be working in the 3D viewport. So you should already be here, which is fine. I've given you a lot of content in these Blender files, so we can get to rendering really easily. If you didn't have them, it would take a lot of time and effort to build up all of these, like the materials, the figures, the lighting, the shading, all that in Blender. So this file is just to help us get started like super quickly with it. So let's see, on the top right over here, it should be the top right for you if you have one of the files I gave you. There's a lot of different layers up here that all have different things in them. There should be, if you're in the first link I sent, there should be two humans, like one male, one female. We can preview different layers by clicking the little eye icon next to all of them. So if I turn the eye off, the human in the middle goes away. I can turn on another one. In my case, I've also disabled it in viewports entirely, so it's a little bit lighter on our system. If you preview something on and you don't see anything come up, you can also click the little TV screen right next to it, and that'll actually enable the layer to be viewed. And then the last one on the right here, there's a little camera icon that's enabling it in the render. So when we get to kind of the end of the tutorial about this, we can actually look at what rendering means in Blender and how that works, but this will be important later on. So for right now, you can just choose either one of the humans in the scene, and you can preview it on, and we'll work with that. Right now, I'm just going to have this person in the scene. Pretty simple. For zooming into the person, you might be somewhere else in the scene far away. And when you're zooming in, like Sarah said earlier, you could get stuck and not be able to zoom in completely. If you've worked with Rhino before, which, yeah, the zoom only has Blender. Let's see. If you work with Rhino, you know there's the camera tool where you can drag a box around an object and zoom into that specific location, and that'll reset your orbit point. In Blender, we can do the same thing. And I believe There is a button you can click to do that. Let me see. I'm not sure, but I know the hotkey, and I think we went over this last time. But if you hit Shift B on the keyboard, and let me know if this works for someone. Yeah, does it work to zoom in? Shift B, and then you get these crosshair lines, and you can drag a box around the position you want to zoom into. If you let go, it should zoom in. Yeah. Cool. Right to that spot. So Shift B, it's a really nice hotkey. I use it all the time when you orbit around because you'll inevitably get stuck somewhere, either too far close to something or too far away, and you'll need to fix that, the zoom boundary. What? Oh, jump scare. So there's also this other thing in the scene, and this is the main, what do they call it? It's not the, I guess it is a cursor. But this little lifesaver red and white ring is the origin point for all things or all objects in the scene. So the next thing we'll do is import an object into the scene, and that'll go relative to this point. So this point is important. And I believe if we left click in the scene, although it might be different for you guys, it'll change the origin point based on where I click. So we can move it around. I'm assuming left click doesn't work.
It just says there's an option.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so I think we can select the cursor in the left-hand toolbar over here. And I think that'll give us the option to move it. Okay. Yeah, so we can select that cursor and move that. So this will be important when we import stuff. I believe we did go over importing last time when we were taking the mannequin from landing pad or no, from Polycam into Blender, but we'll go through it again. So right now with the humans I have in the scene, I did this just so, since we're working on a wearables topic, once you make something for the final project, you could import it into here and get to rendering super quickly. So if you all have an object that you've been working on, we can import that in right now. If not, I think I left some remnants of past projects I've done in the Blender file, so you could use one of them as well. I think there's some shoes somewhere that we could use. But if you do have something to put on one of these mannequins, we can go to File and then Import, and then it's a little bit different than other softwares where in Blender you have to select the file type first. So if you export it as an STL, we'll have to select that first in order to find the object. And then we can just select the file we want and bring that in. Give everyone a second to find stuff if they're looking for it.
Is this one particularly hard to upload? Okay, so do the same.
Oh, good. Yeah, I mean, download's always quicker. I was just a little worried. For reference, I am in the second link, but again, it's going to be the same except for the human figures I've included are just different between the two files. The second link has more people in it. Okay, was everyone able to find something? Are we okay? Yeah. So when you import a file, it might not be exactly where you're looking at the moment. So I always zoom out and find it in the scene, but when you do import, it will show up with this yellow outline around it. So that's the object that we brought in. Right now I have a glasses frame that I brought in. So with this, what we can do is we want to move it to kind of the part where you'll want the final image. So if we want the final shot to be something like this, then we want to move the file that we brought in up to that point. So one way to do this is on the left hand toolbar, we have this move option. We also have rotate and scale, but we'll just use move right now. Okay, so when you have the move tool selected, another thing, the actual movement cursors might not be on the object. So if you were in Rhino and you were modeling something that wasn't on the origin of Rhino, it'll also import in that same location. So if the origin of your Rhino scene was down here and you were modeling up here, the object is not going to have the cursor surrounding it. So one thing we can do to fix that, to actually move the movement cursors to the object itself, is under object in the top here. We have a lot of options, but the one we want to look at is object set origin. And with this, we can reset the origin of the object to the center of mass. So this will relatively change the origin of it to the middle of the whole object. So we'll go ahead and click this button. So reset the origin to the center of mass. And then this should move the cursor, relatively in the middle of the object. So it's easier to move around. Okay, so with that origin reset, now we can move it to the cursor that we set a little bit ago. So, again, we can select the cursor option and point that to the location we want to move the object to. So it's right there. So the first way to get the object to the spot is to physically grab some of the handles and move it. But there's an easier way to move something to the cursor if that's what we want to do. So with the cursor set, we can just hit Shift S on the keyboard. That should work for everyone. So mine has a snap feature. It says snap. Yeah, so you have a wheel, I have a drop-down menu, but if you hit selection to cursor, that'll move the object we have selected to the cursor location. So it's kind of like a move from point to point in Rhino. We can move. Nice. Nice. Yeah, Shift S is the snap feature. So in Blender, a lot of the hotkeys I use, the most important ones I would say are Shift B to reset your view, Shift S to snap objects from one location to another, and then also Shift A to add objects into the scene. So if you want to remember any hotkeys, those are the three. It's all Shift, B, S, or A. Be the most important ones. So with the object snapped to the cursor, now we'll probably just want to rotate it and resize it to actually fit the scene. So right now, if this is the frame of a pair of glasses, it's way too big. So to scale it down, we can use the scale tool on the left, or if you don't want to use the tool itself, we could use it, drag it, holding Shift. Wait, or not. Wait, okay, so with the scale tool, if you want to scale it uniformly, we can use this big white circle on the outer edges of it to do uniformly. Or if you're like me and like using hotkeys, we could use the scale hotkey, which is pretty simple. It's just S. So if you hit S, you'll automatically get the scale tool, and you can just scale it down by moving your mouse in or out from the origin. So I'll use Shift B again to zoom into her eye here so we can set this a little bit better. Okay. So I'm going to rotate it now. you might have to rotate it as well. Again, we could either use the rotate tool and actually use the little green, red, and blue globe here to spin it and rotate it. Or again, we could use a hotkey for rotate, which is just R for rotate. And hitting R will rotate it based on our view currently. So the current view will rotate just around this visual axis. Or while we're in this state of rotating, we can select any of the axes to lock it to rotate about that axis. So by doing that, I've selected the object, hit R to rotate. And then while it's moving, we can either hit X, Y, or Z. So if I hit Z on the keyboard, it'll bring up a blue line there. And then now the object will only rotate about that blue axis. If I hit X, it'll now rotate about the red axis, and same for Y. So really handy just to use these three axes to rotate. Or you can be a little bit more free and just hit R and rotate based on the scene. So and now I'm going to move it into place. So again, we could use the actual arrow keys in the move tool to move it around. And a little tip for the movement as well. Up on the left here, right under like file, edit, render, there's this orientation mode. And if we click the drop down for that, there's a lot of options here. By default, it's in default, which means the X arrow is locked to the X axis always, no matter how you rotate the object. But we could change this to local. So now the axes are set locally to the object. So if we were to rotate this object, the axes will be stuck. So the green's this way. And if I rotate, now it's over here. So it's stuck to it. So this is sometimes nice if you're doing a lot of rotating and you don't want the axes to change on you. You can set it in local. We can also use a hotkey for moving, which is not M, it's actually G for this one, which just means grab. So I guess we could call it the grab tool instead of the move tool. But I'm just going to rotate this, scale it, and set it into place. So this is vaguely good enough for me. You could spend a lot more time, really making this perfect on the model to get a nice photo. But for now, I'm just going to set it close enough and keep moving on to the next point. So once your object is set in place, the next thing we can do is actually start adding materials to it. So right now, I'm just going to check. Right now, I'm on a laptop with no GPU or no graphics card inside of it. So all the rendering that we do is going to be done on the CPU, which takes a little bit longer generally. So if you have a better computer, say at home, because I doubt anyone's carrying a whole rig with them. But if you have a better computer with a graphics card, we could go into the edit preferences menu. And in system, in the preferences menu, you could select your graphics card. So if it's a chip with CUDA on it, you could use that. Or if you have not an NVIDIA card, you could use optics or HIP. I think one of these is for the newest Macs. So if you have one of those, that would work too. But usually, it's usually a Windows computer with a graphics card. So we could set that here and then you could render on the GPU, which is much quicker. But for today, we're just on the CPU for this. So no one has to update any of these settings. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is pull up another window so we can see what the materials look like as we start to set them. So with Blender, we have this one screen open just with our models in it. If we were to come up to the top of the 3D viewport window, so around every window, there's a little bit of a chamfer, like a rounded edge up top. If you hover over that corner, we'll get this little crosshair icon that comes up just when you hover over the corner. So while you're hovering over that corner and have the crosshair, what we can do is add a new window this way. So if we were to left click, we could pull out to the left and grab a new window from there. So now I can have a split screen. So with the left screen, we'll keep this in the 3D viewport so we can orbit around. And in the right viewport, we'll set this to our camera so we can actually see what the render looks like in kind of real time. So was everyone able to get that split screen?
Where did you find
Hmm?
Where did you find the percentage of the camera?
Oh yeah, we're gonna do that
Oh,
right now. Yeah, we're still in 3D orbit for both scenes. So actually looking in the camera, everyone should have a camera in the scene. It's gonna be this, pyramidal shape with a little black triangle on the top of it. So that's the camera. The black triangle is just saying this is gonna be up. And it should have a long line that goes out to infinity, which is gonna be where we can set the focal length of the camera. So if you don't see the camera, it might be in a different layer on the top right-hand side. So if you just turn on all the layers, there should be a camera somewhere and we can grab that camera. So with the camera selected, was anyone able to not find the camera? Okay, with the camera selected, what we're able to do is, let me move this. So annoying. So in that right-hand window, we have the same menu up top in both windows. And with these menus, since the window's not that long, it kind of cuts off some of the menu, but if we use the scroll wheel, we can see all of the menu. So there's more to the right. So we have all the rendering options on the far right, and on the far left, we have some of the option menus. So on the far left side, we have this view option. So if we hit view, come down to camera. So we have to have the camera selected while doing this. So we select the camera first, then come to view camera, and then we can actually set the active object. So that's the yellow object as the camera. And as soon as you hit this, it should automatically switch you into camera view. And I believe there's a black void around the camera, which is good. It's also something you can edit if you want to see more of the scene. So it doesn't have to be a black void around it. We could turn it off. So that's just in the camera settings down here, although it does not matter for this this tutorial. I'm just showing it as possible if you want to see more of the scene. But I'm going to keep it fully black so we just see what we're rendering so we don't get confused. So in the camera screen, when you're viewing this mode, you'll always want to just pan around. So if you hold shift and do the middle mouse wheel, you can move around the scene. If you were to just orbit in this view, so you just hit the middle mouse button, it'll pull you straight out of camera mode and you'll have to go back into view, set it to go back into the camera. Do that again. So if ever you break out, you can always go back to view camera. And now since it's already set, we can just hit active camera and it'll go back there. Okay, so now that we're in the camera mode, I tested this before, so hopefully it doesn't crash again, because last class it was always crashing. I was trying to do this. I'm going to save really quickly. Also a good time to remind everyone just to save if they work on anything. Well, when this finishes, I'm going to put the camera screen into the rendered mode so we can start to see some actual colors. Right now we're in, what we would call the clay view, where everything's like just a gray value pretty much. Wait. You're selecting the what? So if you just left click on something, like it doesn't. If you right click on something.
It's fine. If you're done saving, you still save it.
You do anything? I mean,
It's fine. You obviously like the photo.
that works, because if you were to turn off, which I don't think you did, but if you turn off the checkbox on the layer panel, that'll turn off like selecting things. It pretty much turn off everything. So yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, so now in the camera view, I'm going to go all the way to the right on the toolbar, and we have these 4 options up here. So the first one's wireframe. Doesn't give you a lot of detail, but it's the lightest viewing setting. on Blender. Next one is object mode, which we were already in, which will show you kind of the clay view. The next one is the viewport shading, which will show you some materials in a preview mode, but it's not anything realistic. It's like if you had a red material, it'd just like be red, but there's not a lot of shadows and stuff. I'm going to click on viewport shading, and your fans might kick on at this point. And it'll take a second to actually refresh and show you the render thing. Hopefully mine doesn't crash. If it does, I will just tell you what's happening instead of showing you. But it looks like we're good so far. So, okay, that's a good point. So the first link actually has materials on it. The second link, I forgot to internalize all of that. So I'll do that later. But right now, I don't have those skin shaders in here. But we can still go over putting other materials on. So I see, yeah, some of you actually have nice materials, like nice HDRIs and texture maps, but I don't have anything, which doesn't really affect it, but we're going to apply a material to the actual object that we've imported in the scene, which in my case is this glasses frame. So with your object selected, and this is the only thing you should need to add a material to, everything else should already have it, because I put it in before to make this quick for everyone. But in the far right over here, we should have this other panel, which has pretty much all the settings of the scene. And at the very bottom of it, you might have to scroll down, but there's this red kind of sphere there called material properties. And this is where we can actually add materials to an object in the scene. So we can either hit new to add a new material, and we can build one from scratch. Or I already gave everyone a massive bank of a bunch of different materials, not just the materials on the mannequins, but like some practical rocks and metal and stuff like that. So we can click this drop down with the kind of the white sphere now next to new. And this has the repository of all the materials that I've saved in the Blender file. So we can see a lot of stuff here. It's in alphabetical order. So you might have to scroll down, but I do have, you know, some metals in here. So I'm just going to use a simple metal grain for this one. So I'm going to zoom up pretty close here. In rendered mode, it'll take a little bit to actually refresh your view if you zoom or move around. So you can kind of see up here, it's telling you how many samples it's gone through so far, which is pretty much just the pass that it does on the image to calculate all the light bounces and the color properties of every material. So right now I'm only on sample 6 of over 1,000, which you don't have to wait till it finishes. It'll just take a while if you move around to actually update all the pixels. So that's pretty much it for setting materials. We can just select one from the library that I have here. It'll automatically set it to your model. One thing you might have to do is if the model is still looking a little rough in the render view, it might just be because you don't have a lot of polygons on the model. So if you're modeling in Rhino, you might have, you know, few polygons. The model I have here has a bunch of polygons. But if it is looking kind of tessellated, like you can see the triangles in the STL, one thing we can do is come to object drop down, and there's 2 really nice settings kind of in the middle here called either shade smooth or shade flat. Usually out of Rhino, every STL is going to be flat shaded. So you're going to see all the creases and breaks in the triangles in the mesh. So if you hit shade smooth, it'll just smooth out all those transitions and it won't look as rough, even if you have few polygons. So you can hit that and that might give you a smoother look in the render view. So that's setting materials. If you actually want to edit materials as well, so if you want to get even more technical and actually change how the material looks, you've probably noticed on the right side, there might be this little color value, which you could go in and quickly change the color there. But if you were to make some more windows or just change one of your windows, we also have this thing called the shader editor. So same thing in the top left. In the first 2 windows, we had it as the 3D viewport, but we could change one to be the shader editor. and you don't have to do this. I gave you enough materials where you should have, everything you might need, but if you want to change colors, you can come in here and actually play with some of the sliders, like we were in Grasshopper, but this is just a kind of computational way to construct materials. So there's a lot of math going on to actually make the material. Yeah. Yeah, so you don't need to bring up 4 windows, but if you want to, you could go to the top and just pull down and it'll open another window. But what you could do is we could just, with the 2 windows we have, change the left one. So if we come into the top 3D viewport, we could change this to shader editor. And then it would start to show us the actual algorithm that makes the shader. So this one, the one I have, metal grain, has 3 sliders. So we have these different roughness values and then a color. So there's not a lot going on with this one, but you can, make it more rough, less rough if you want it to be more or less shiny. And then we can also change the color here. So I have it as a nice like silver color. Okay, so yeah, that's like setting colors and stuff, but I'm going to come back to the 3D viewport just to look at a couple other things before we actually go to render and finish off this image. With the camera itself, you can imagine the camera as, any realistic DSLR. We have all of the aperture and f-stop settings and a normal camera will have. So if you know how to use a normal camera, you might, get a jump start on some of these settings here, but I'll show a couple simply. The one I'll look at is just the focal length. So we could blur in and out different, depths of the image. So let's see, right now in the 3D viewport, with the camera, it might be inside the model, it might be outside, but there is this little yellow crosshair on the camera line of sight. And this is the distance out from the camera that it's focusing on. So this is the focal point of the camera. And right now in the camera settings on the right side, we have this green camera if we have the camera selected. And we can come down to depth of field, and this is where we can see the focal length and change the f-stop and things like that. So right now I have my focal length set to an actual object in the scene. So let's see if I can find that one. Okay, so I have my focal length set to an object. I think it should be for yours as well, but I have these empty spheres which don't render as anything. They're just there to be a placeholder. And this one, let's see, is just the placeholder for the focal length. So we can use this to actually change what the camera is looking at. Yeah, so it should be in the scene. It might not be for you. Yeah, is there a sphere around the head? Okay. Yeah, so that should be the actual object that's controlling what the camera is looking at. So I did this to make it a little bit easier to kind of shoot the camera, because if we didn't have this empty sphere, you would have to, use your rotation tools to actually rotate the camera, which is a little bit less intuitive than, just setting the thing you want to look at. So I can move that sphere into place, which is this one right here. So once it's in place, I kind of have it, let's see, I'm going to put it right on, so the eye, so where we put that piece. And with this empty object as well, we can also, set the selection to the cursor, automatically line up the shot. And then with that, since this empty sphere is controlling the, position that the camera is focusing on, and it's also controlling where the focal distance is, we can come down to the camera settings again to the aperture drop down, and we can start to change the f-stop here. So right now, I believe the shot is pretty wide, so pretty much everything is in focus. But if we were to bring this value down to say, 0.02, it'll bring the depth of field a lot shallower and will pretty much blur out everything that's not the glasses frame that I have in the scene. So everything in front of that point and everything behind that point is going to be, have a greater blur on it. So just an artistic tool if you want to, have a shot like this. Okay, so with that, I have my shot pretty much all set up. So we have the object in the scene, we have materials on it. We've set our camera, and we also have lights in the scene as well. But those should already be set up if you're seeing a good previewed render. The lights are also following the object that the camera's following. So if I were to zoom out here, maybe they're not. Sometimes they might be set up in yours to follow the camera. But just like any other object, we have these big light sources. We could also move them around. Oh yeah, they are actually shooting at that camera position. So we could change those lights just to show you if you wanted to, but from the screens I can see, it looks pretty well lit. But just know if you want to move lights around, they are surrounding the scenes, so you could reposition those. So last thing before we actually go to render, is if you want to pose the people, you do have the possibility, up to you, if you're composing a shot that needs, the rest of the body or a pose, but all the people in the Blender file should be pre-rigged. So the updated file, so the second link I sent has a more extensive rig. The first file I sent just has a basic bone structure. So in the first file, you could grab, each bone, which is just what they're called in Blender, but you could grab one of the arm bones and kind of move the angle of it to change the position. But in the second file, we actually have a rig set up, which makes it a lot easier to set different poses. So in order to do that, we can click on the rig itself, which is all of these arrows and boxes if you have the second file open. If you have the first file, you should see little segments in, each part. So the arm would have, one bone up at the top, one bone at the bottom, and then some bones for the fingers. You could click that bone as well. It should be kind of shown through the skin of the mannequin. This one, we have outlines on the outside, so we can see a little bit better. But once we have it selected, we can come to the top again. And in the last Blender class, we went through object and edit, but with an armature selected, we also have pose mode. So with the armature selected, we can go into pose mode, and it should turn it a different color. The first file, all the bones will go a light blue color. In the second file, we have a lot more going on. But basically, each one of these objects will affect a different way that you can pose the mannequin here. So with the hands, I'm just going to select, and I'm in the second file. So we have some inverse kinematics going on. So with this one, I can select this kind of outline of the hand here, and this controls the whole position of the arm itself. So with the inverse kinematic setup, basically what it's doing is we can move kind of this focal point, and it'll figure out where the rest of the bones should go. So I can just move this point, and the arm will kind of bend and rotate naturally, and we can just set it into maybe a lower position here. So, I would urge you, if you don't have the second file already, to go download that one and work in that one to actually produce renders for the class for your final, because the rig is great and it is super easy to use. With the other one, you would actually have to manually rotate each bone into place, which just takes a lot longer. So yeah, this one's a lot easier to pose. And again, everything will do. Maybe don't change that one, but we can drop the shoulder, turn the head, things like that. So yeah, the rig is super nice. But one thing to note, if you import your object in the scene, it's not going to follow the bones as well, or the armature. Only the mannequin is following the armature. So if you move the head, in this case, I would have to move my object to line it back up. So I'm just not gonna move that. But once you have a pose set, we can just go back into object mode and it'll save the state right there. So if you wanted to play around with Blender even more, you could do some research and find tutorials on actually animating and making videos from Blender, because we could animate a walk cycle with this armature, or you could shoot a short video with the armature and your object as well. But that's the basics there. So now with everything set up, we can actually go create a render. So we have the shot in the camera as we want it. So the last thing to do is just to set up the location that you'll save the image and actually hit render. So on the far right, again, where we were playing with the materials a few minutes ago, there's another 2 settings up top. So we have the render properties and we have the output properties. So with the output properties first, we'll look at the resolution. So this is just going to be the final pixel density of your image. So right now I have it 1080 by 1080, which is pretty standard. And we're looking at 100% render. So this will make the image exactly 1080 by 1080. If it was 200%, it would double both of those numbers and we would have a 4 times as pixel dense image, making each side twice as large. So that should be preset. 1080 by 1080 is fine. If you want a higher res image, you could increase these numbers, but we're going to leave it at that. Next thing to look at is the frame range. So right now, since we only want to take a single image, I'll just set the frame range to start and end both at 1. So we take a single image. If you were making an animation or recording a video, you would want more frames. So with standard video is around 24 frames a second. So keep in mind, if you want to shoot a second of video, you would need to actually take 24 pictures and then string them together to make the video. So right now I'm just going to leave it at both start and end at 1. And then last portion to look at is just the output section. So this is actually where it's going to save to on your computer when you hit render. So we can go to the little folder icon here and set the location that we want to save the image at. So I'm just going to quickly set that location, just put that on my downloads folder. And then you can also set the name of the file as well. So actually, let's look at that. So we can set the name down here for the file, just hit accept. So when we hit render, the image that it produces is going to save in that location. So that's where you can find it later. Last thing to look at is just what kind of media are we creating? I should have it preset as a PNG, but you could, set it to a whole number of different things, JPEG. We could even record MP4s out of here, but I would not recommend it. Just do everything, and PNG is fine. And then last thing, looking at the color, I have it set at RGBA. You'll want to keep that if you want anything to be transparent. You'll need that alpha channel. And then everything else should be good. So we're good there. Last thing to look at is just the render properties. You shouldn't have to change anything here. This is kind of the settings of how it's going to render. So I've preset all these to be pretty good values. So you shouldn't have to change these. But if you want to look at some settings here, you could. With this render, I will point out in the actual render dropdown here, we're not going all the way to 1,000 cycles because that would take ages. I'm capping it at a certain value. So when the image is clear enough for us, it'll stop and it'll use an AI denoise program to actually clean up the final image and take out any noise in the pixels in the render. So it should be a pretty quick render, basically doing those 2 things. So with this, finally, what we can do is come up to the top panel here. So file edit, we'll hit render. Once you hit render, we can just hit render animation. And then that should render. One thing though to check before you hit render is what I mentioned earlier is this actual camera button on the layers panel in the right-hand side. If you want it to show up in the render, we'll have to make sure that we toggle on the camera for all the layers that we can see. So we know this is our scene. I have this human 4 layer and the photo studio layer turned on, as well as the object that I imported. So all those are previewed on, but we also want to make sure they're also turned on in the render. So once that's done, we can go to render, hit render animation. And in a minute or two, depending on how fast your laptop is, you should get the final image. Let's see what it does to my computer, if it actually works while I'm streaming and sharing my screen. So it'll probably take a while on a laptop. If you have a computer with a pretty good GPU, this might only take a couple seconds. But on here, it's probably going to take a few minutes. Okay, so it's actually going to work, which is nice. The first thing it does is actually put all of the materials in its memory. So it gets that ready first, and then you can see we're actually rendering tiles up here and how many samples we're doing per tile. So if you're on a CPU, the best thing to do is probably go tile by tile. So right now it's going to render just a little square at a time as it builds up the whole image. If you have a GPU, you could probably render the whole thing at once, just because the differences of how they work. But yeah, it looks like it's estimated to take around 5 minutes on my computer. So we'll let it sit. And maybe when we're answering questions for Grasshopper, it'll finish. But that's pretty much the tutorial. Did that one finish? Okay, looks nice. Yeah, so that should be it. If anyone has questions, I'll be on Discord to answer them later. If you have any other random issues with Blender, because I probably covered 0.01% of what you can do with Blender today. But yeah, I guess once it finishes all the tiles, it'll take a little bit longer to do the AI denoise part. So yeah, that's good. Oh, and I see on Zoom, no one can see the actual render on my screen, but I swear it's going. Let me see if I can actually pull that up. Okay, yeah, so you can see on Zoom, this new window should have popped up and it'll start doing all the squares of the render. It's probably going to the AI part. Maybe. Yeah, sometimes it dips black and then it loads up that part, so. But I guess to that, always hit render animation, because if you hit render image, that'll just save it locally to Blender and not to your hard drive. So you might see it finished and be like, where is it? But just to know, animation, 1 frame, good way to go. But yeah, that's Blender. So if anyone on Zoom has questions, let me know. If not, we can move on to answering questions for the last, hour and 10 minutes of the course, or however long anyone wants to stay to finish their project. But what's today, the 11th? So I think we have like 4 more weeks until the end. So we still have some time. Every class from here will just be Q&A. We'll just work on the rest of the classes. But do remember that the final rubric prompt needs at least a couple renders. So you should be all set up to do that now. And yeah. So does anyone have questions to start with projects today?
The question.
Yeah. Yeah.
So once it's done, does it already say that I can just exit out?
Yeah, so that window currently that you have pulled up, if you exit out of that, it'll stop the render if it doesn't already finish. If it is finished, you can exit out of that window. You can exit out of the Blender. It's fine. It should be saved to your desktop. Which I think it's done. You can also check at the bottom. There's usually like a little loading bar. Sometimes it's like little green. I think it'll tell you loading, but it'll also tell you at the top here. So once it's done, the remaining will go away, and it'll just have like the final time that it took. So it's done then.
I do have questions about the
Sure. Yeah, if you want to start, if you're ready.
So I changed my idea
Yeah.
and I kind of want to do, let's go into earrings, and I want to do something similar to the business idea for web.
Mhm.
And how it's like three dimensions or three different layers of it.
Okay.
And that was similar to the Sunlight. Maybe,
Yeah.
but I couldn't, I tried to follow his grasshopper on the website.
Yeah.
But then it didn't work, so I was watching the YouTube video on how to do the foreign one,
Okay.
but it was exactly my pictures.
Mhm.
So I guess there's like my main question is, can you help me if I do over the one that the guy did for the classes?
Yeah.
Help me figure out how to make it.
Yeah. Which classes this were?
Um,
Oh, was it was Will's project, right?
yeah,
Okay.
so I'm trying to, like, I like how it's, it looks like it's three-dimensional, like multiple layers. So I try to follow this,
Okay.
but it didn't work.
Okay. Yeah. Hopefully he's a different picture there, but might not be everything. But yeah, I think I don't think he was like I don't think he's using a one like component in this one. Did you use a one component?
I used the diamonds for when I
Yeah.
did this one I used the orange.
Okay. Yeah. I can probably pull Will's file up. But so Will's file basically was he modeled the surface of the glasses in Rhino. So he did that manually, and then with those surfaces, he did the pattern on the surface, and then using the crystalline plugin, kind of combines the lines more together, and then just pipes it, and makes it into 3D print with Dendro. So yeah, that's what you're looking at. I would start off by making the surface, which I don't know if you did before you went to this one.
Yeah, but I just did like a flat, I just like
Mhm.
had two lines and one for them.
Okay.
But I'm having to make it.
Yeah, so if you want more 3D, I would definitely either like revolve it or actually build some sides onto it. Because if you want to see that 3D look, if you had a thicker thing with two sides or even I guess multiple layers of surfaces, you could do the pattern and then the curves with crystalline would look across the layers and combine it together into one thing, which might be more what you want.
So do you think I should make three, I say if there were like three straight planes, and then from there I can do the grasshopper, I can connect.
Yeah, you could use Will's workflow pretty much. I have to change a couple things, but for the most part, yeah, I think would work. Yeah. Yeah, you just add the pattern to the surface and then combine lines together. Yeah, see what that happens. It might be easier also to imagine what the final thing is going to be than using the Voronoi. The Voronoi is like completely random.
Yeah.
And just like weird cells and stuff. So. Yeah, try that.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone on Zoom have questions about their final project we can go over?
Yeah, I've got like a general question almost.
Yep.
I'm doing the arm cast kind of thing. And I was just struggling to get the like lofted surface to look right. When I was trying to make it around the arm, if that makes sense. I can't share my screen because I'm on Zoom on my PC because that's where I was following along on Blender. But the way that I was putting the two planes, parallel to each other and then creating a bunch of planes in between them, it was leaving weird sections on the end where the part of like the part that goes towards the hand, it's got a slight curve on it. And it didn't like that I had a curve there. Let's see.
Okay. Yeah, we're Was each of the sections actually a closed curve, or were some of them open? At that bend.
They were all closed, and
Okay.
I was following the uh, online tutorial about how to make sure they were closed and everything.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can take a screenshot real quick and send it
Yeah.
to you on Discord. You can start helping someone else, but I do have a question regarding the like that loft kind of feature.
Yeah, no, sometimes the loft does get wavy and like have some weird like perturbations in it. If
It wasn't necessarily wavy. It was more so like it just didn't like the fact that it was kind of rounded up and over the palm area. So I'll
okay.
actually let me take a minute and join the Zoom on my laptop, and then I can share my screen real quick.
Okay. So should we get to someone else and then come back?
Yes, yeah, go ahead.
Anyone in the room have questions? Yeah.
I was having trouble with basically my screen of the. I did this one and I didn't think the side, and then this one also ended up here. I'm just trying to get like that. They were having it
Okay.
attached.
Yeah, so you could use sweep to curve.
That's what I did.
You and Ryan or ground?
And then.
Okay. I mean, it would probably work in Rhino. I just wasn't familiar with the process of ground popper. But so you have the back curve, right, and the front curve,
Yeah.
and then you have an individual curve just for that kind of bottom section for each side as well.
For this one, I just did like the two sides,
Like the whole side of it.
not the whole, just
Okay.
like, I made like a curve. Here, and then I had a curve on the top, and I had a curve like this, one like that, and the top view, like, here, so,
Okay.
and then I just had this with my.
Gotcha. Yeah, let me try something on here and show you what I would do. Maybe that it should hopefully help something. Let's see. Okay, so I mean, yeah, with this method, it's a little tough to make things like, I guess, nice, because it's hard to do like a rounded toe, but then also sweep that up with like two side curves, just because it doesn't like that too much. But I'll show you what it, I guess, what's possible with that. And which Rhino do you have again?
7.
7, okay.
I did so decent, I don't know if that even made a difference.
Yeah, so yeah, I'll go into that as well in a second here. So let's see. Okay, so something like this, I mean, vaguely, front and back and then the sides of those shoes. I mean, this might be the most complex that you can do a sweep with 2 rails. So let's see. Okay, so both of these top ones are the sections. And these are the rail 1 and 2. Doesn't like it. I mean, kinda, but it still has this weird kind of curve in the middle. So yeah, using the sweeps, or I guess any of the standard Rhino tools, usually let me down because they're not exactly how I'd like it to be. So I mean, what I would try is modeling the sub D yourself. I haven't used the sub D sweep too much, but what you can do is actually like model the geometry by yourself, like without using any of these commands. So have you used this sub D plane
No,
before? Okay. So with the sub D plane, so just this flat one, we can draw pretty much just, I guess, top down view, like the kind of the overview of it. And then with this, we can actually come in and holding, actually, wait, why is it paused? No. Let's see, where's that set at? Okay, so we can come over to the right side of the sub D toolbar and set the selection filter. So I'm just going to set it to edges. So yeah, with this, now that we've set the selection filter, we don't have to click anything on the keyboard. I know last time I went through sub D, I said you had to hit Control Shift to select a certain thing. We can just turn on this filter, and while this kind of sub window is active, actually I'll send it to point and faces as well. We can just come in without clicking any keys on the keyboard and just select the two surfaces or the edges we want, and we can pull that up. And then we can come back and maybe I'll grab those two edges and these two edges just to finish it off. And then with this little circle here, we can actually add some more faces. So I'll grab that and pull it down, and we can kind of finish those sides off. And you could come back with this point and, just, eyeball it like as close as possible to the actual curve of the shoe to line that up. And we could even add, with this tool, we could add another edge loop. So with the edge loop, and this is all recorded, so you can see it later. With the edge loop, we can select an edge, I'm gonna hit enter, and this will just add another edge in there. So if we want another point to control it with even further, we can add that point in, and now we can get better control with how this bottom curve is looking there. So, and maybe even, you could mess with the shape that way too. So that's probably what I would do to kind of, and I guess not have as many issues in modeling, because the sub D, once you set it, it's actually exactly how you want it. And using commands in Rhino is a little funky sometimes. So since you have Rhino 7, I'd probably go this route. Hopefully that helps. But
so you would recommend not doing it with closed toes. Yeah.
well, you could do closed toe as well, which with the two curve loft is really hard because it loves to throw arrows at you for like no reason. But with the sub D, like it's super easy. We could just, select that face and come rotate it like that. And then like in, a couple seconds, we can pretty much, well, don't do that, but
Yeah.
we'll pretty much get to that closed toe shape. So
For TNCA, like a little selection filter.
yeah. Just move this good somewhere. Yeah, I just found this out like 2 days ago. So like
No,
good
like
tip.
last week, you didn't know that
I
one.
didn't. But I actually was like, it's gotta be a way. So I kind of looked at the toolbar, like actually looked at it. And over the right here, there's the filter options. So you can just set this, the whole window will pop up, and then you can actually set specifically what you want. So we could just do edges, and then like I could never select a face. I can just do edges. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, just like in graphic stuff.
Yep. Yep. But then if you actually want to select the object again, you just close it, it goes back to normal. So yeah. Yeah, it's a nice one. Okay, Ben, if you're still here, we should be ready.
Yeah. Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. Do you want me to share my screen and show you what I'm talking about?
Yeah, please. Let me just turn that on.
Okay.
Okay, you should be good to go.
Do screen here. Okay, so basically, I have this pulled up. Let's see if I can. So there's the arm. It's in there. I have the shell a couple inches off. Or sorry, a couple. Come on. It won't let me hide it now. But you can see, like, I have the
Yeah.
surface basically just on the outside of the arm. The only problem is that I need it to be open on this end over here. Oops. I can get this to hide. I don't know why it's not letting me hide the. How do I hide this hand? How can I
I
do
mean,
that?
if you type it, it should go away. Just type hide. Yeah, and then just hit enter and it should go.
Okay. Yeah, so here's my problem is it's not open. And
Oh, on that
and
side, yeah.
yeah, I'm not sure how to get it to be like this sleeve where it is open on this side. And so my idea was like, okay, well, maybe I can take like curved planes and do the same thing where each of the planes are like C shapes from the top view, like over here. You can see these
Yeah.
curves. They're both the same arc, whatever. And so I went into here and I had started to set it up. But they're like weirdly crossed. So like they work, but I don't know how I managed to do that. And so the idea was then to take these and put I don't remember where I was. So the idea was to have this, but with curved faces.
So do you have is that top part the original script, like the one that made the closed off hand?
Yes. Yeah. And so I was just messing around down here,
Okay.
just kind of
Can you-
free
can you
moving.
Go back to the top one, like the actual panels or the section curves.
This part.
Yeah, interesting. I wonder why it's
And so,
closed off.
yeah, it just kind of closed itself off instead of lofting to this final curve here.
Can you keep going down the grasshopper script?
Yeah. Oh. So I aligned all the curves, or and then I got the loft. That was,
And the option for closed isn't set to true or anything.
no.
Just have adjust set to true.
Yeah, I was just following what we did in the class with the chest piece. Like I said, it's closed off strangely.
Right.
But this side's open.
Let me see.
Was it because the plane was in front of like the first plane here?
Oh, I mean, it could
I
be.
didn't have it intersecting the shape, the original shape.
Yeah, if you move the plane in more, I do wonder what would happen if that would.
So I think I did try that, and it opened up like this tiny little sliver on the front here. Like it opened this hole here, but I need this whole like curved piece to be
Gotcha.
seen. Because like I was showing you, I needed, oops. I want it to look like this on the top of the hand. So that's kind of what I was going for.
Oh yeah, it would be tough then to have a flat
Yeah.
right there to get that. So your curve idea.
So that's where like I said, goodness, this came in.
Right.
And I was going to do the same process.
Yeah. So, and you could even tween between that curved front and like a flat plane at the back. They don't have to both be the same shape.
Okay.
So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, so yeah, it looks like it's just flipping around.
Yeah, I don't know, because this is the path that I did for that. So I've got the one curve and two curves, and then I lofted them to make a plane. And I did the same thing. So I, made those, and then I set them to be surfaces.
Yeah.
And then I went to tween them together.
I mean, one thing, so with holding shift while you put the wire into the curve input, unless you did them both exactly the same way, that could be why.
I thought I could have flipped the loft. I
Right.
thought like maybe this loft was lofting this way and this loft was lofting this way.
Right.
But I double checked that. I mean, I could try it again. I'm not sure. But I know what you mean. So that's the bottom. And that's the other bottom one. Oh, hold on. Oh, well, it worked.
Yeah.
So I thought I did that after the first time it worked, but I guess I just did it opposite again. I don't know how I did that. All right.
Yeah, that can get you. I guess one thing too, you probably don't have to use tween consecutive surface. You could probably just use tween two surfaces, which has a lot less inputs. Just something I was looking at while you were doing that. I don't think it would have helped the issue, but
Right.
it does
Just
have
tween
a,
two surfaces.
yeah, that's the most simple one if you just have two surfaces.
Okay.
And I mean, that refit might also, I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't have an adjust button. There's probably a more, complex way to check if both surfaces, like the UVs are going the same direction and all that, but
Right.
if you can fix it just by changing the inputs, that's good enough.
Okay, so that was okay.
Yeah,
So now I need to plug this into here, basically, sort of, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
mean, it should work. You can try it.
Okay.
I worry about having the plane near the elbow be curved as
Right.
well, because you want the whole surface to intersect the entire mesh before you
So
do that thing. So,
the mesh is bigger than I should. It goes up the elbow.
okay. Yeah. I mean, so if you want the end to be curved like that, that's totally fine. But if you want it to be flat, just know you can
Okay.
tween between the curve and a flat plane.
Okay, I'll have to mess with that as well with this just tween surfaces one. Maybe I'll do the flat plane on the back here and then to the curved plane on the front. But like I was saying, this front curved plane should be intersecting like right before. Let me find the planes. Yeah, so it should be right before where it would be closed off. So it should be open.
Yeah, it should work. It should work.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. You're welcome. Okay, anyone in the room have questions? Yeah. Yeah, the one I had. Yeah, the one in the window. So, well, I can show you the script for that one. But I don't expect anyone to actually redo this script. Like, there's a lot going on. But let me find it. Okay, so this is what I wrote for that one to just make that mask thing. The only reason it's this complex is because there's a slider that'll give you a new output every time you change the slider. So it's like super randomized. So there's a lot of checks and balances in here to get that final thing. So there's a lot going on. So I don't expect anyone to do that. But I guess basically for this one, what I did is we did a workflow a couple weeks ago where we're using kangaroo and a random curve around the head to like make this kind of body size object with shortening that curve over time. We could make that big thing. That was a couple classes ago. It should be on YouTube. I basically started with a very similar thing where we just populate points, connect them with the curve, and then you get something pretty random curve. And then I just use this component to pull that to the mesh itself. So basically, if this was on the face, you could make that really random curve, and then you pull it to the mesh of the face, and then it's gonna fit to the face. And then from there, you could probably pipe it and then get it ready for 3D printing. So at its core, it wasn't that complex, but there was a lot more going on in this one specifically. But let me remember. So Sarah, last week or 2 weeks ago, when I gave you this, you were working on the snake and we wanted to pull the curves to the mesh.
Yeah.
Did I email this to you or was it in the Discord?
Which is nice.
Okay, if it is, then you should be able to find it there as well. But let me just check. Okay, yeah, I'm not sure. I don't see it. So. Select group.
Square.
I thought, but it's not file sharing. At least I don't think.
It wasn't, it was just in general.
In general. Oh, it is in general. Perfect. Okay, so in the Discord in general, on April 4th, there's a Grasshopper file there called curve to mesh. So that'll probably solve a lot of your problems, because you can make pretty much anything random around the head. If you want to do like a mask, and then you just pull it straight to the mesh, and then you're like 90% there, and then you can do whatever else you want to it to make something more interesting. But basically, yeah, that component will help you out a lot. So yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, does anyone on Zoom have any questions for me?
Real quick, RJ,
Yeah.
it worked. It worked beautifully.
Cool. Perfect. There you go.
Perfect. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, first off,
Yep.
yeah, how would you start it? Actually,
Yeah, do you have a picture of one? Or yeah.
how would you make this? Like, I want to get solid, but here's what you're doing. The wire that I was looking at before.
This would be interesting.
Yeah.
I can show you in there's two ways probably.
Okay.
You can look at. Okay, so yeah, for this purse, the first way we could look at it is if you actually wanted to build it all by hand, definitely possible if you're Rhino 7.
I'm not gonna say.
Okay, we won't do it that way then. We got Grasshopper. That'll do it. So one thing we could do to make something like that is just with the standard tools, you could pretty simply just draw the outline. So if you kind of imagine that middle line of the purse, I'll do that quickly here. So close enough. Okay, so with the curve, and we can change this later on to get more of a exact thing, but I'll just set that into Grasshopper. One thing we can do with a curve is actually set called perp frames in Grasshopper. So you can do, there's two options, one with a single plane and one with many frames. So we can do the many frames one, and if we plug the curve in, pretty much straight away, we'll get these little planes that pop up around the curve. With this end value, you can make more curves or more planes on the curve if you want, but right now 10 will do us pretty good, so we'll just stick with that.
Wait, okay, how did you go? Like, cause I do the,
Mhm.
I also do the circle.
Yeah.
So when I put it instead of like grasshopper, but that's curve, it didn't really. Yeah, it didn't.
Okay, is it some of your display settings? maybe? So right click on that curve. And then hit set one curve. Then we'll just select the curve.
Oh,
And it should pop up. So, yeah. you got that. Okay, so yeah, with these frames, the thing I imagine that's the easiest is to grab a circle. There's just this orange one right here. And with this, it has an input for a plane and one for a radius. So with these frames, we can use these as all the planes. So if we plug the frames into P, we'll get a circle on each of these planes. It's kind of hard to see, but we got little green circles on all of them.
Yeah.
So with those, we can basically change the radius of each one to be either skinnier for the handle or thicker for the bag as it goes around. And one way to do that is with a graph mapper. So this is also in the parameters drop down at the very left of the screen, but graph mapper, we can pull that in. And we can use this basically just drawing a curve in the graph mapper. We can make the circle smaller or bigger pretty smoothly. So first thing you have to do with a graph mapper is just right click on it. It'll bring up this menu. We can go to graph types and we can pick a type of curve that we want in the scene. So the easiest one for this, because we want to have a lot of control over it personally, is to use the interpolated one. This will give us a few points. What is it? 5 points, and we can actually manually make this curve whatever we want. So
I don't have the interpolator. I only have like, I have everything in separate interpolator.
graph type. No, not this one. Yeah.
So,
Hey.
Can I? Is there a training so is it still using?
It should be. Yeah, no,
Is
take it
it-
off yet.
it-
Point 2.5.
It's it's putting the small pieces, because
I saw this. Yeah.
it's for printing at printing
I think Nick, are you printing 0.25?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, okay, so it was like, if I need to print it, I have to switch it out to like 0.4.
Yeah, you
Or-
could.
Oh.
Yeah.
Or is it gonna cost issue first?
Well, if you have the setting of 0.25, it should be fine.
Okay.
It'll just take longer.
It's take off.
Is it a big thing?
So-
I mean, you can switch the nozzle.
Yeah, I'm gonna switch.
All the tools should be right below.
And then the nozzle is the one in for.
I believe so, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so if you don't have interpolated, we could also just use polyline. You have that one? Yeah. This should also do the same thing. It's not going to affect the script too much. The only difference is the graph will look like a line segments instead of a smooth curve, but it's not going to make the back look like line segments. So, but yeah, we can grab that, and then going into the graph mapper, we'll just have to set kind of the range of the smallest and biggest settings of the circles. So I'll grab a range component and pull that in. Let's see, I think this is what you have to do. Yeah, there's a plugin called Rich Graph Mapper that I like a lot more, but we can use the graph mapper that comes with Rhino. Should be fine. Okay, so let's actually set a domain as well. So with the D input for the range, this is actually going to be the smallest and biggest values that'll output. So right now, by default, it's 0 to 1, which 0 is going to be nothing, and 1 is probably going to be really small in this context. So the easiest, well, I don't know, maybe not the easiest, but the most user-friendly thing to do is to grab a component called construct domain, which should be this little box plot right here with 0 and 1. Make sure not to do the squared one, just do the normal construct domain. We'll plug that into the domain input for the range. So now we can actually add sliders to control the small and big parts of the bag. So we just grab a slider. So I'm just going to do 0.00 to 50. Give us a lot of range there. And I'll just duplicate that. So we have 2 sliders now. So those are just A and B. Just plug them both in. Cool. Okay, so now you don't have to have this panel up, but I'll just pull it up just to show. So when we change the bottom slider, let's just go into 0 and 1, which is annoying. Okay, yeah, I kind of forgot how this graph mapper works. So we need one more step just for this one. We'll use a remap component so we can actually set the final range. So what remap does is it takes input data. In this case, it looks like I can only get 0 and 1 to come out of the graph mapper. So we'll have to take the 0 and 1, and using that domain, we can set another domain of say 0 to 50 to remap all the numbers. So 0 is now 0, but 1 is going to be now 50. So we have much bigger range between those numbers. So we'll plug the graph mapper into the V for the remap. We'll plug the domain that we just created into the S. So this is this actually plug it into T, sorry. So that's the target domain. So we have, 50 as the large number. I don't know exactly what the value has to be, but just for now. And then S is fine, 0 to 1 by default is where it should be set at. So now let's look at it in here. Okay, so Mm. Here, what is it? Okay, I didn't make a couple changes to get this to work. So I just took the domain out of the range. So I just deleted the connection between it, and it's just going into T now. Okay,
So the meaning, okay, we just.
yeah, so range is just back to 0, 1. It wasn't giving me the right values. So this should be good. So now we can see I have 0 to 50 with this graph mapper. So this is the first value, which is 0, which is correct. And this is the last value, which is at 50. So everything in between, you'll see the numbers change as I move this up or down. And it's only kind of changing in that lower half because we're just moving the little point in the lower half. So we can do that for both of them. So this is what we use to actually set the radius of the curve. So we can just plug the remap values back into radius here. And now we should see our circles start changing sizes up there.
So what was that?
The R from the remap goes to the radius, and the F from the perp frames goes into the plane for P. Yeah. So with this currently, I'm noticing an issue where this last plane has 2 circles in it, which that's because with the frames, we have 10 frames, and then for R, we have 11 R values, which just comes back to this range here. So 10 steps is actually giving us 11 values. So instead of 10, I'm just gonna add 9 there into the number, and that should fix our issue.
Okay, yeah.
Cool. So with that set up, we can kind of, well, I guess before we start changing values, I'm just gonna loft LOFT, and we can plug all of the curve sections into that loft there. Now we're pretty close. Last thing to do for the loft is to actually fix some of these settings here. So if you right click on the O for option, we can come down to this loft option drop down menu, and you just want to hit close loft. So just check that and then hit commit at the bottom there. And then this should actually close out the loft. So now I have like a fully formed bag, and then open one.
Yeah, mine's right.
Yeah. So you have one of the sliders set at 0. So it. Oh, you might just have something too big. If you think about that. What is the error? I couldn't. There might be another thing you could use. Do you have the pufferfish plugin? Yeah, so there's another one called unsplit loft surface. Might try that one. Sometimes it works better than loft does. But we can just plug the curves again into S and get rid of this one. We know if anything works with that one. Nothing. Weird. What's the red? Actually, yeah, so it's just I noticed that they have 11 instead of 10. So there were too many rating values for them to circle. So, and then I guess last thing, I want to say, which we can probably go back to log at this point, but we'll just say, that should close it out. Which you could also use a toggle, but same thing. So, okay, so at this point, it's pretty nice. We can actually go back and it looks like my top right here is the 0 point, so the smallest one. So I'll probably just change this graph. So both of those are small. Then it gets bigger towards the bottom. Yeah, so at this point, it's really up to, making sure the Rhino file is pretty smooth and everything, but that'll get you pretty close. And then you could go back using the same workflow, like if you wanted to add those rings around the handle as well, you could draw more circles and just do the same thing.
Okay.
Get those, but yeah, I think that'll give you a good start on this. Yeah. Okay. Oh, you actually like in this update, yeah. Okay, so yeah, so I've got this box. Let's see. I'm gonna turn on my fancy that thing. So to make a loop, I might start by, and you don't have to do this, but I'm just gonna add some more surfaces for myself to work with. Okay, so we'll have to select like, I guess actually you might also want to do that. I'm just gonna add one. But I basically just wanted two surfaces that weren't touching to be apart so we can like start the loop. So I use.
What the lanes like?
Oh, so the thing I just glossed over. Yeah. There's this button called insert sub the edge loop. Yeah, sorry, I thought you were talking about like making like a solid ring to connect different pieces like for the snake again.
Nah.
But yeah, sub the edge loop, and then you can just double click on any edge and it should give you all the connected edges in that loop. So if you imagine the sub D boxes, I guess all of the lines are different loops, so that they all have like connections to each other. But yeah, there you go. So you can do it with horizontal one. Let's see. Yeah, you can get pretty crazy with it. I guess the one thing I will point out before you go too far in sub D modeling is, I guess the rule of thumb generally with sub D is anything with 4 corners. So, 1, 2, 3, 4 is the best shape for sub D. Anything with less or more is gonna maybe give you a weird outcome sometimes. So 5 points, a little weird, 3 points might give you weird kink in there. But it's the same for gravity sketch. I always try to stick with 4 points. It's not a rule, like a hard fast rule, like you can have shapes that don't have that many points, but just know it, down the road, you're gonna break edge loops if the shape doesn't have 4 points, but up to you. Having 4 points sometimes is really constricting, so. But yeah, I guess other sub D tips that I learned recently. So I guess one for, I don't know, whoever's interested, but if we have 2 sections like this, let's see, and you want to actually merge 2 surfaces like this together, we can click the bridge tool, get a nice little bridge quickly like that. Or one thing I learned recently, which you can do this in Gravity Sketch easy, but it took me forever to run to figure it out. So if you have 2 like boxes like this next to, not like that, boxes like this next to each other, and you want to actually merge the 2 faces so there's not like this crease in the middle. One thing we can do is stitch mesh. Oh wait, I think we have to delete them first. And then, oh no, wait, no, I know. So we'll just use points. We'll go to stitch here. So stitch wants points. So I'll grab 1 point and then grab the other point, and it'll put those 2 points in the same position and kind of stitch it. So that's a nice one too. So stitch, grab a point and grab the other point, and they'll stitch them together. So you can do it in Gravity Sketch, but I just learned the other day that you can do it in Rhino as well. So that's pretty helpful for constructing shapes like that. So yeah, that's everything I learned recently. Anyone else on Zoom have any questions?
RJ,
Yeah,
I had a question.
sure.
Let me just share my screen.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so can you see?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so this is about the hat.
Mhm.
And so like the last time we talked about it, that trying to create like a mesh, like a concentric circles, and then seeing how it falls. With that, I kind of like tried to create variables like lines divided in. So so I wasn't able to like divide it. So there was one option to divide the curve, and that divided it just like in equal parts. So I used this curve variable, and that kind of divided it in different parts, but then this is what I get, and it's like kind of forming the sharp edges. Is there a way to like smooth these out?
Yeah, so I guess basically you want to divide the circle, but still keep the circular nature of it, but just in different segments.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a way we can do that. I could share my screen again if you want.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that might be easiest, so I can just walk through it real quick. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so there is this one called yeah, called chatter. So let me grab some circles again. Okay, so yeah, there is this shatter component. And what we can do is reparameterize it first to make it a little bit easier to work with. And then this t lowercase t value is where we can actually split it at. So we can use a range component to actually construct this. So with reparameterizing it, we're saying that the curve starts at 0 and ends at 1. So
Okay.
that's really easy. We can just keep this domain how it is from 0 to 1. And we can set the number of steps for each circle. So I'm just going to use these same 3 sliders and maybe just change their values, make them a little lower. But basically, if I plug, just like I did for the radius for the circle, so I plug all 3 of these into the number here, plug that into t, and let's see, now, let me just graph this as well. So right now, we have 3 curves ungrafted, and then we have 3 values that are in different branches. So the data doesn't line up, so we'll just graph the top one to make sure all numbers are in 3 different branches. So that should,
Okay.
it's a nice thing there. So now the circles, you can't see it, but they are divided into, the first one has 4 segments, second has 9, third has 11.
Okay.
So what we can do is, I'll just grab this list item. I'll go from 0 to 10, so we get all 11 in there. That's not it. And then with this, I can actually visualize those segments. So I'll just turn this off and this off. So you see, we get segment 1, segment 2, segment 3, and segment 4. So we see that
Yeah.
middle circle only has those 4, and the next 2 have a lot more. So all those
Mhm.
different ones. So yeah, I guess that's one way to split it up. And then
Okay.
if I use discontinuity, I can actually get the points on each circle. So we can see the circle, and then we can see the points that define the start and end of each segment as well. And then you can see we can change that just with that slider there. So does that help with the question?
Yeah, it does. But then now my question remains that if we divide it into different segments, would we be like, if we print it, we would need some like radial lines supports that would go in, right? So how do we get that to be unequal now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I mean, it's tough because I mean, if each circle had 4 points, then you could easily make radial lines based on those points. But now that they're all different, let me see. I think, well, one thing you could do, we talked about having, maybe one side is more dense than the other side in
Yeah.
radial segments. So let's do this again. Okay, so now they're all going to have just 4 points to them. Let's hide this. At this point, I'm going to use 3 different domains for all of them. And these will all be from 0 to 1 because we reparameterized. But I'm going to have 3 of these now instead of 3 different number values. So plug these in. So with this last one, what I could do is I could constrict this domain, and this will bring all the points in.
Yeah.
can with the second one. And now what we can do is we're kind of limiting the domain of the circle, so we can pull them in. And then this gets you a lot closer, so we can make it really dense here and add some lines, and maybe you could do this again.
Yes.
Change, where that domain is for the second half, and then let's see, we'll just finish it off here. So interpolate, so let me flatten this. So we have 5. Okay, I have 30 points for some reason. I haven't done this workflow before, so there's probably some more you can do to not have 30 points because we should only have 12. But I'm just going to remove duplicate points with Kangaroo. Yeah, so now. Oh, it looks like we have
Yeah.
15 total. Okay, 15. Partition it by 5. So we should get them back in their different sections now. Let's see. And then we'll flip this list to have 5 sets of 3. Yep, so we can actually pipe that line. There we go. And now we have segments that span across. So yeah, that's probably one way you could do it.
Yeah,
Interesting. Yeah. So
yeah, that seems to work well. Yeah, I'll work on this again, like try out some patterns with this. And
awesome. Sounds good.
Okay. thank you.
Welcome. Braz, you're the last person on Zoom. You have any questions? Okay, does anyone else in the room have questions? Cool.
Can you hear me again?
Yeah. What do they have? I think I could get Discord to come up on this computer. Okay, we'll probably stop recording now.